The city of Zyphora was a graveyard of steel and shadows. Neon signs flickered over cracked streets, and the hum of distant engines never stopped. People moved like ghosts, heads down, careful not to attract attention. Corporations ruled everything, and anyone weak enough to be ignored quickly disappeared. Among the forgotten streets, a single figure moved with careful purpose. Kellen Rourke was one of the city's ghosts. Once a skilled mechanic on a freighter, now he scavenged for scraps and food. His coat was patched with pieces of old uniforms, his hands scarred from wires and engines. Most nights, he slept in broken-down crates or under the skeletal remains of derelict buildings. He was invisible to the world except for the predators who smelled weakness. That night, Kellen was following the sound of shifting metal. A group of scavengers had been fighting over a junk pile, and the noise had drawn him close. The city smelled of oil and rust, and a cold wind carried the faint metallic tang of blood. He crouched behind a fallen billboard, eyes scanning the alley. The scavengers were gone. Too quiet. His instincts screamed at him. Then he heard it. A faint, irregular gurgling. Almost like a whisper but shaky and uncertain. Kellen froze. The sound was coming from beneath a smashed energy crate. He moved closer, every step careful, his hands gripping the edges of the crate. What he found made him pause. Curled in a ball was a tiny alien child. Its skin was pale and almost translucent. Its head was slightly too big for its body, and its enormous eyes were open, but empty. They didn't see. It made soft, pitiful noises, and Kellen felt something in his chest tighten. Every instinct screamed that it was helpless, abandoned. Kellen knelt slowly. Hey, little one, he said, his voice low. He had no idea if it understood, but the sound of a human voice seemed to calm it slightly. The baby lifted its head, swaying like it had no control over its body. Its lips opened, making a quiet gurgle, but its eyes didn't track him. He looked around quickly. The streets were empty, but that meant danger could be anywhere. Hunters, gangs, corporate enforcers, they could be coming back. He had nothing but his coat and a small knife tucked in his belt. Still, he couldn't leave it there. Not like this. He had survived Zyphora by hiding, by avoiding risk, but now he faced something that needed him. Something entirely helpless. Kellen lifted the child gently, careful not to hurt it. It shivered against his chest, tiny limbs weak. The warmth of its small body contrasted with the cold city air. He whispered to it even though it could not see him. Don't worry. I got you. I won't let them hurt you. The words felt strange coming from a man who had spent years speaking to no one. But for the first time in a long while, he felt like he had a purpose beyond himself. Moving through the alleyways was harder than he imagined. The child stiffened at every unexpected sound, the clatter of a metal pipe, the distant roar of an engine. Kellen guided it carefully, one step at a time, keeping to shadows and empty streets. Every corner held the possibility of danger. His mind worked fast, calculating routes, escape paths, and possible hiding spots. He couldn't afford mistakes. Hours passed. The city seemed endless. Every step brought fatigue, but Kellen forced himself to keep moving. He talked to the child constantly, giving it a voice in the silence of its blindness. He told it about small things, lights in the sky, smells of the street, the cold wind, but he also warned it of danger, of the world outside their fragile hiding place. Somehow the child seemed to respond, shivering less, cooing faintly. It trusted him even without sight. Then a sound froze Kellen in place. Footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, mechanical. Not human. Corporate enforcers. They had arrived, probably tracking some signal, or maybe they were just lucky. Kellen's heart pounded. He pressed the child closer to his chest and ducked into a ruined doorway. The footsteps grew louder, echoing through the alley like the city itself was warning him. He peeked out. A patrol drone hovered, scanning the streets with pulsing red lights. It would detect heat signatures. The child's small body might be invisible to it, but Kellen could not risk moving. They would notice him first. He whispered almost to himself, "Think, Kellen. There has to be a way." A broken pipe above rattled, sending sparks down into the alley. The drone paused, sensors shifting toward the sound. Kellen took a deep breath. He couldn't wait. Every second counted. With careful precision, he used his coat to cover the child, shielding it from heat sensors, and waited for the perfect moment. As the drone passed, Kellen made a quick decision. He darted forward, pressed the child to his chest, and sprinted toward a narrow side passage. Sparks flew, the drone's red sensors swiveled dangerously close, but he dove through the gap just in time. His lungs burned. The child clung to him instinctively, tiny fingers gripping his coat. For the first time, Kellen realized that surviving wasn't enough. He had to fight, to protect, to outsmart the city itself. Ahead, the alley twisted into darkness. A new danger awaited, but Kellen had no choice. He whispered again, "We keep moving. No one can take you from me." The child cooed softly, trusting him. The night was far from over and Zyphora was full of predators. But for the first time in his life, Kellen Rourke felt alive not for himself, but for someone else. And that small spark of courage would be tested sooner than he could imagine. Kellen pressed Orin tighter to his chest, running through the twisting side alleys of Zyphora. The patrol drone had passed, but the sound of its engines lingered in his ears. Every shadow could hide another threat, gangs, corporate enforcers, or worse. The city had a way of swallowing the weak whole. He couldn't let that happen to the child. Not now. He slowed only when he reached a half-collapsed building. The walls were cracked and broken pipes jutted out like jagged teeth. Kellen set Orin down gently, watching the small alien coo and reach blindly for the sound of his voice. The child's tiny limbs trembled, but there was a flicker of trust in those sightless eyes. That trust was all Kellen had, and he would protect it with every scrap of strength left in him. The first challenge came almost immediately. A low rumble shook the building. Kellen's instincts screamed danger. He scanned the floor and saw a pack of scavengers moving through the alley below, their eyes glinting under masks, weapons ready. They weren't here for him, they were here for something rare, something valuable. Something like Orin. Kellen gritted his teeth. He had no guns, no weapons beyond a small knife, and nothing heavy to throw. He had survived by thinking faster than his enemies, by using the city's ruins against them. He grabbed a loose pipe from the floor and held it like a staff. If they noticed him, he would have to fight. But fighting was a last resort. The child had to stay hidden. He whispered to Orin, "Stay quiet. Don't move." The baby tilted its head, sensing the urgency. Kellen led him through a narrow vent just above the scavenger's path, the metal cold and jagged against his palms. Every step required balance and patience. One slip could send them both plummeting into danger. But Kellen moved carefully, inching along the edge of the vent, Orin cradled against him like precious cargo. Hours passed in tense silence. The city at night was alive with noise, distant sirens, the roar of engines, occasional gunfire, but the two of them moved as shadows, almost invisible. Kellen felt exhaustion gnawing at his bones, but stopping was not an option. He found a small alcove in a ruined building and pressed the child against his chest. Orin shivered but didn't cry. The trust between them had grown, fragile but strong. Then came the sound of a scanner above, mechanical whirring that froze Kellen in place. He peeked over the edge of the alcove. A hovering drone scanned the area with a red pulse. It was small but deadly accurate. If it detected heat, they were done. Kellen's mind raced. There was nowhere to hide. The child's small body might be invisible to human eyes, but heat sensors could detect him instantly. He grabbed scraps of broken insulation from the floor, wrapping Orin's tiny body to shield him. His own body pressed against the alcove wall, moving slowly, deliberately, trying not to trigger the drone's sensors. Every heartbeat felt loud, echoing in his chest. Seconds stretched into minutes. When the drone finally moved on, Kellen exhaled quietly. One close call, but they survived. By dawn, they had crossed multiple districts, each more dangerous than the last. Kellen guided Orin through abandoned transport tunnels, teaching him to sense vibrations in the ground. The child could detect movement without sight, reacting to Kellen's subtle nudges. Each small success brought relief, but the danger never faded. The city was relentless, and every step forward was a step toward new threats. Kellen began to plan. Survival was not enough. They had to escape the city. He mapped a route in his mind, using knowledge of old maintenance shafts, hidden passageways, and forgotten tunnels. Each turn had to be precise. One mistake and they would be caught or worse, killed. The weight of responsibility pressed on him, but it didn't break him. Courage was not the absence of fear, it was moving forward despite it. As the sun rose, Kellen and Orin emerged in a section of the city half destroyed by corporate conflicts. Crumbling buildings and rusted machines created a maze perfect for hiding. Kellen used this terrain to teach the child basic navigation. Feel the walls. Listen to the echoes. Every step tells a story, he whispered. Orin moved tentatively, guided by touch and sound. Small victories but critical. The child was learning to survive. Their respite was brief. From across a cracked rooftop, Kellen spotted movement. Another team of hunters, this one better equipped, faster, and clearly aware of his presence. Panic threatened to rise, but he pushed it down. Every step, every breath had to be calculated. He whispered, "Stay close. Trust me." The child pressed into his coat, sensing the danger through instinct. Kellen acted fast. He pulled a nearby cable and swung Orin over a gap between buildings, landing safely on the other side. Sparks flew from exposed wiring, the hunters shouted in frustration, and the child gasped in surprise. Kellen didn't stop. He led them through narrow alleyways and broken corridors, using every scrap of ingenuity to stay ahead. The city was a predator and they were hunted, but Kellen refused to be prey. As night fell again, Kellen and Orin crouched atop a crumbling building, the city sprawling endlessly below them. The distant hum of engines and lights felt oppressive, but Kellen looked down at the child. Orin's eyes, though blind, seemed alert and alive. For the first time, Kellen allowed himself a thought that had been dangerous to entertain. Maybe they could survive this. But survival was just the first challenge. Bigger threats were coming: corporate enforcers, advanced drones, and the ruthless elite of Zyphora. And Kellen knew they were closing in. Every decision from this moment on could mean life or death. He clenched his jaw and whispered, "Tomorrow we fight smarter. Tomorrow we show them what humans can do." And as the city's neon lights flickered below them, Kellen understood the truth. Protecting the child was no longer just about survival. It was about courage, about defying impossible odds, and proving that humanity could rise, even in the darkest alleys of Zyphora. The next day, Kellen led Orin through the maze of crumbling rooftops and forgotten maintenance tunnels. The city below was alive with danger. Drones whirred overhead like metal insects, scanning for heat and movement. The hunters of Zyphora were relentless. Kellen knew they would not give up, and every wrong step could be fatal. He paused in a narrow passage, pressing Orin against his chest. "Listen," he whispered. The baby stiffened but stayed quiet, sensing the urgency. From above, a faint mechanical whir grew louder, a swarm of surveillance drones, their red sensors sweeping every alley. They were looking for Orin, and they would find him unless Kellen acted. Kellen scanned the ruins around him. He noticed fragments of old hollow projectors, cracked mirrors, and hanging wires. A plan formed in his mind. It was risky, maybe impossible, but it was the only way. He set Orin down carefully and began assembling the pieces. Broken projectors angled toward the walls, mirrors set to reflect light in unpredictable directions, wires connected to the few power cores he had salvaged. When the drones arrived, the city seemed to shift. Shadows twisted unnaturally, red beams bounced off mirrors, and holographic images flickered across walls. The swarm paused, confused by what seemed like multiple targets. Kellen guided Orin through a hidden maintenance shaft, weaving between the illusions he had created. Every step required precision. One wrong move and the child would be exposed. For a moment, Kellen thought they were safe. But one drone broke formation and hovered too close. Its sensors swept the area, detecting heat signatures. Kellen held his breath and pressed Orin closer. The baby's small body shook against him. "Almost there," Kellen murmured, moving slowly along the shaft. Sparks flew as a wire touched a loose metal plate, setting off a small shower. The drone hesitated, then moved on. Hours passed in tense silence. The city felt like a living trap, each alley and corridor a potential death sentence. Kellen rested Orin against his chest, letting the child feel the warmth and steady heartbeat. Every soft coo from the baby was a reminder of why he could not fail. He had survived alone for years, but now someone else depended on him. And he would not let them down. As night fell, Kellen realized the hunters had adapted. Their movements became more coordinated, more aggressive. They were closing in, using predictive patterns to anticipate his route. Kellen needed another plan, something bold, something no one would expect. He remembered the old freighter docks on the edge of the city. Abandoned for decades after corporate wars, the area was a labyrinth of rusted ships and crumbling warehouses. Perfect terrain for asymmetric tactics. Kellen led Orin there, moving through narrow passages and leaping across broken catwalks. Every step had to be calculated. One misstep could send them tumbling into the water below, or worse, into the hands of their pursuers. At the docks, Kellen began setting traps. He used magnetic pulses from old ship engines, rigged scrap metal to trip sensors, and created sound decoys using old speakers. Orin, guided by subtle vibrations in the ground, could detect the movements of the hunters before they arrived. It was risky, but together they became a single force of precision. Human ingenuity and alien instinct combined in a way no one expected. Then came the critical moment. A small team of corporate enforcers arrived, moving stealthily, confident that the child was within their grasp. Kellen waited, heart pounding. The first enforcer stepped into a magnetic trap, dropping hard as his suit powered down. Sparks flew. Another tripped over the decoy wire and slammed into a crate. Orin, sensing the vibrations, whimpered softly but stayed calm. Kellen guided him carefully, moving from shadow to shadow, leading the remaining hunters into a maze of their own confusion. One enforcer, more experienced than the others, began to track them with infrared sensors. Kellen had anticipated this. He lured the man into a narrow catwalk between two rusted freighters. The boards groaned under weight and Kellen shoved a loose panel. The enforcer fell, crashing into a tangle of metal below. Kellen didn't stop to watch. Orin was counting on him. Exhausted but determined, Kellen led Orin to the heart of the docks. Here the terrain worked entirely in their favor. Broken cranes, shattered warehouses and deep water channels created a natural fortress. Kellen paused, letting the baby cling to him. "We've made it this far, little one," he whispered. "But they won't give up." From the skyline he saw the incoming shadows of more drones. They were faster now, smarter. But Kellen had learned one truth. The city and its hunters were dangerous, but they were not cleverer than a human mind driven by courage and purpose. He would find a way. He had to. Orin's life depended on it. Kellen's eyes scanned the area, calculating, improvising. Every second counted. He tightened his grip on Orin, whispering again, "Trust me. Always trust me." The child's soft coos were a fragile promise, a symbol of hope in a city designed to crush it. And Kellen knew that the next move would either save them or destroy everything. Above, the drones paused, their red sensors sweeping the docks. The hunters were closing in, relentless. But Kellen smirked slightly, a spark of defiance in his eyes. Humanity had survived worse odds. And tonight, that courage, that determination would be tested, and proven, once more. The docks were quiet, but Kellen knew it was only a trap waiting to spring. From the skyline, he could see the flashing lights of corporate patrols converging on their position. Drones hovered in calculated patterns, their sensors sweeping the area relentlessly. Zyphora's elite hunters were methodical, ruthless, and better armed than anything he had faced so far. There would be no simple escape this time. He crouched behind a rusted shipping container, Orin pressed against his chest. The baby's tiny limbs twitched, responding to his heartbeat. Kellen whispered softly, "We fight smart. One step at a time. You stay close, okay?" Orin cooed faintly, trusting him completely, and that trust hardened Kellen's resolve. He couldn't fail, not now, not ever. Kellen scanned the docks. Old cranes, shattered warehouses and flooded cargo bays could be turned into traps. He moved fast, improvising. He pulled wires from derelict machinery, setting up magnetic pulses that could disable drones. Broken boards became tripwires, barrels rigged to fall, crates stacked to create choke points. Every scrap of material became a weapon in human hands. His mind raced, calculating angles, timing, and the weight of each trap. The first drone approached, its red sensors sweeping the dock. Kellen pressed Orin against his chest and waited. When the drone hovered directly above a magnetic pulse trap, it sparked violently and crashed into a stack of containers. He felt a small surge of hope. Human ingenuity was working. Hunters began to move on foot, their boots clanging against metal walkways. Kellen led Orin along a narrow corridor between two rusted freighters. A loose plank above his head threatened to give way with every step, but he calculated the weight and timing perfectly. A hunter stepped into a tripwire, a crate toppled, knocking him to the ground. Sparks flew. The other hunters cursed, but they were slow, reacting to chaos rather than controlling it. One hunter, a tall, armored human-like figure with advanced sensors, started tracking them with infrared scanning. Kellen's pulse raced. This was the critical moment. If they detected Orin, everything would be lost. He whispered, "We move together. No hesitation." He pressed the baby closer and darted across a collapsed catwalk, leaping over a gap just as the hunter fired a pulse rifle. The shot missed, hitting a stack of metal barrels, which exploded in a shower of sparks and smoke. Kellen ducked into a shadowed corridor. He could hear the hunter pursuing, heavy boots echoing. Orin cooed, sensing the vibrations, and instinctively pressed closer to Kellen. The baby's awareness, even blind, became a tool, alerting Kellen to danger he couldn't see. Using the vibrations, he guided Orin through narrow shafts and hidden vents, staying one step ahead of their enemies. Every instinct, every calculation, every ounce of courage mattered. They reached the heart of the docks, a flooded cargo bay surrounded by broken cranes and collapsing warehouses. Kellen realized it was perfect for the final stand. He set up his last traps, rigging cables and magnetic pulses to create a deadly gauntlet. If the hunters pursued, they would be funneled into a kill zone. It was risky, but there was no other choice. The first enforcer stepped into the bay. Sparks flew, metal twisted, and he was thrown to the ground, disoriented. Kellen moved with precision, using the chaos to cover Oren's movements. The child sensed the vibrations and moved instinctively, guided by Kellen's whispered directions. Every step was a calculated dance between life and death. The remaining hunters surged forward, but Kellen anticipated their moves. He used crates, wires, and debris to redirect them into traps. One hunter tripped over a rigged cable, falling into a pool of water, short-circuiting his suit. Another misjudged the catwalk and plummeted into the flooded bay. Each trap required careful timing and precise calculation. Kellen's mind raced, never stopping, never faltering. Then came the final hunter, the leader. Advanced armor, advanced sensors, and no hesitation. He scanned the area, calculating Kellen's path. Kellen's pulse quickened. He couldn't confront the hunter directly, brute force would fail. He needed strategy. He led the hunter toward a precarious stack of crates rigged with magnetic pulses and loose panels. As the hunter stepped forward, Kellen triggered the trap. Crates collapsed, panels fell, and magnetic pulses disabled the hunter's armor. He crashed to the ground, defeated, while Kellen pressed Oren close, both of them safe. The battle was over. Exhausted, Kellen looked at Oren, who cooed softly, blinking in the dim light of the dock. The child was alive, unharmed, and trusting him completely. Kellen realized that human courage and intelligence had won where brute force could not. They had survived against impossible odds, not because of weapons but because of resourcefulness, determination, and a refusal to give up. He carried Oren out of the cargo bay and onto a high catwalk overlooking the city. The neon glow of Zyphora stretched endlessly before them. Kellen's chest ached from exhaustion, but a faint smile touched his lips. They had survived. Against drones, hunters, and a city built to crush the weak, humanity had prevailed. He whispered, "We did it, we survived, little one." Oren reached up, tiny hands brushing Kellen's face, and for the first time, Kellen felt a weight lift from his shoulders. It wasn't just survival, it was victory, proof that courage and intelligence could overcome any odds. But Kellen knew the city would not forget. The council, the corporations, the hunters, they would regroup. This was not the end, only a step forward. Yet for now, as the first rays of dawn illuminated the crumbling skyline, he allowed himself a rare moment of hope. They had faced impossible odds together, and humans had shown what they could do when driven by courage and purpose. The dawn over Zyphora was cold, the neon lights fading as the first pale sunlight touched the crumbling city. Kellen carried Oren across the high catwalks, each step careful, each breath measured. The city below was quiet now, but he knew that peace was temporary. The corporate hunters would regroup, drones would return, and the council would not forgive a blind Liravi slipping through their fingers. But for the first time in days, Kellen allowed himself to breathe. Oren's small hands reached for him instinctively, fingers wrapping around his coat. The child's soft coos were the only sound in the early morning, a fragile melody against the harsh backdrop of the city. Kellen looked down at Oren and felt something he hadn't felt in years: hope. He had survived alone for so long, but now he wasn't surviving just for himself. He was protecting something precious, something innocent. They found shelter in an abandoned warehouse near the docks, one Kellen had scouted in the chaos of the previous night. Rusted walls and broken machinery created a labyrinth of hiding places, perfect for avoiding drones and patrols. Kellen set Oren down carefully, letting the child explore the small, safe corner they had claimed. Oren's fingers brushed over broken pipes and crates, and Kellen watched with a mix of relief and pride. The baby was learning to navigate the world without sight, relying on touch, sound, and instinct. Kellen knew that this was more than survival. This was teaching. Every step, every whispered instruction, every careful movement through danger was shaping Oren into a being capable of thriving even in a city designed to destroy the weak. And Kellen understood something fundamental. Humans were capable of more than brute force. Courage, intelligence, and morality could overcome even the most impossible odds. From the shadows he watched the skyline. The city was still a predator, still dangerous, but he had changed something. By protecting Oren, by guiding the child through chaos, Kellen had proved that human determination could defy even the most powerful systems. He had acted not out of strength, but out of ingenuity, morality, and unyielding courage. That was the edge humans always had, the ability to adapt, to think, to hope. He settled against a crate, letting Oren rest beside him. The child's breathing was slow and steady, a sign of trust and comfort. Kellen's eyes scanned the broken windows, the shadows of distant towers, and he realized something else. Their story would not end here. Word of their deeds would spread through the city's underbelly, whispered from alley to alley, carried by those who survived, those who witnessed. Humans, unexpected, underestimated humans, could change the tide of events. Hours later, Kellen guided Oren to a small rooftop garden, a rare patch of green in the gray city. Broken planters, weeds, and moss created a fragile paradise. He lifted Oren into his arms, letting the child feel the sunlight on his face. This is your world now, he whispered. Oren's tiny hands reached for the light, for the warmth, and Kellen felt an overwhelming surge of purpose. He had not just saved the child, he had given Oren a future. But survival had a cost. Kellen's body ached from bruises and exhaustion. His coat was torn, hands scarred and raw. And yet, the pain felt different. It was proof of effort, proof that he had faced impossible odds and prevailed. He had risked everything for someone else and in doing so, had reminded himself what it meant to be human. To care, to act, to protect. In the days that followed, Kellen and Oren moved cautiously through the city, avoiding patrols and drones but always advancing. Kellen taught the child to sense vibrations, to read echoes in the ground, to trust instincts. Every small lesson was a victory, every survival a proof of human resilience. And through it all, the bond between them deepened. Kellen was no longer a lone vagrant. He was a guardian, a mentor, and a symbol of courage in a world built to crush hope. The city began to whisper their story. Survivors of gangs and patrols spoke of the human who had outsmarted the corporate hunters. A human who had guided a blind alien child through chaos and danger. Rumors spread of traps set with nothing but scraps of metal and ingenuity. Zyphora's elites could not comprehend how a single human had evaded them, teaching even the most advanced hunters a lesson in humility and fear. One evening, Kellen and Oren watched the sun set over the city from a high rooftop. The neon lights flickered on, but the shadows no longer felt oppressive. Kellen held Oren close, feeling the tiny heartbeat against his chest and whispered, "We did it, little one. We survived. And we'll keep surviving together." Oren cooed, pressing his face against Kellen's chest, a silent acknowledgement of trust and hope. In that moment, Kellen understood the true meaning of courage. It was not about fighting alone or winning by force. It was about protecting others, thinking smarter than the dangers around you and never giving up, even when the odds were stacked impossibly high. Humanity had survived not because of weapons or power, but because of heart, intelligence, and the will to act. The story of a human vagrant and a blind alien child would echo through the alleys, rooftops, and tunnels of Zyphora for years. It was a story of hope, ingenuity, and defiance. A story that proved humans could rise, even when everything was against them. And Kellen knew that as long as he had Oren by his side, there would always be someone worth protecting, and always a chance to show the galaxy what humans were truly capable of. As night fell, the city still loomed, full of danger and shadow. But Kellen no longer felt afraid. He had survived, he had protected, and he had triumphed in a way only humans could. Against impossible odds, courage, intelligence, and morality had prevailed. And in the quiet of the rooftop, with Oren resting safely in his arms, Kellen smiled for the first time in years. The world was harsh but humans were stronger, and he had proven it.